don't be thinking that you're going to walk out of here with a pot of gold. But we have points. Frozen.
It's frozen. Judge, we can't see you if you could hold for a moment.
Well, I'm just playing Jeopardy, so I'm just going to keep going.
But are you on the bench?
I am. Good thing we have the Jeopardy game for us to practice. Let's be not to be confused. That's our category, and only the jurors can answer. Nobody else. Not to be confused for 400 on the menu. Scallops are shellfish, and these are immature or green onions. Who said scallions? Well, they all said it now, you know. Yeah, and of course it's the correct answer. Not to be confused for 1,200, the reflex. That's in quotation marks. The reflex was a #1 hit for Duran Duran. This is the R in the digestive disorder abbreviated GERD. Ma'am, in the back. What is it? Reflux. That sounds good. Very good. How about, not to be confused, for 2,000 points, diuretics are drugs that help rid the body of extra fluid. Dianetics is a book by him. L. Ron Hubbard, did somebody say? Let's raise your hand and don't just shout out the answer, because I want to recognize the brilliance of the individual who comes up with the answer, because some of them are going to be, there's only going to be one person in the whole room who gets it right. This is Easter, and the reason we're doing Easter is because I do this during moments when we're waiting for things in trials, and we're backlogged from Easter, so we're catching up. Does that sound right? Anyway, we've been trying a lot of cases, but I haven't had as many. All acceptable. Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Easter for 5,000. A little birdie told us there's a 2009 documentary all about these marshmallow Easter treats. Yeah. Peeps. Sounds right to me. Okay, what are Peeps? How about Alphabet City for 200? A, it's considered the birthplace of democracy. A, it starts with an A. Yeah, sounds right to me. Yep. How about Alphabet City for 600? I, it's the only major city that straddles 2 continents, Asia and Europe. Yeah. Sounds right. You got it. Now, for bonus, what is the former name of... Okay, can you sing the song? Istanbul, Constantinople. Remember that? And then, what's that?
I'm deferring this way.
Okay, well, that was a very popular song when I was about 70 years ago, when I was a young boy, and then it made a what's the word I want? Had an encore. What's the word? Yeah, a comeback. That's good. And what, about 10 years ago, and I was hoping it would last longer than it did, but it's kind of a neat song. Someone who has, if you need to use the restroom at this point, you can go and they're on the second floor here. Where are they? Men, second floor, third, ladies. Third floor, ladies. Wow. How long have they been here? Yeah, I was going to say, what were they serving over there?
Please press pound, then enter your meeting ID, followed by the pound sign again.
I don't know. That would be a tough choice. Go ahead. That would be a tough choice for me, whether to just fight it so that I could continue to participate in the Jeopardy, right?
Please enter the meeting passcode, followed by pound. You are in the meeting now.
Alphabet City for 1,000. Q, this capital sits at an elevation of 9,350 feet. Yes, sir. Keto sounds good. Yep. All right. Now let's see. You know, the actual percentage of people who needed to go to the bathroom is much higher in this area than back of the railing, and I'm trying to think what the railing. Well, of course, they came over earlier.
Yes, they did. They've
Okay.
been sitting here since 8 o'clock.
Oh, 8 o'clock?
Yeah, they were sending them over in groups.
Sorry about that. Well, I'm not sorry. But I'm sorry for them. A trophy hunter
Did you get my
for 400.
No, my text earlier this morning about Judge Russell. He's right there.
Oh, hi, Judge. How are you? No, okay, thank you very much. Hey, you know what? There is something.
Yeah.
You're gonna what?
Anything that happens outside of that. Oh, is that for?
That's for the
Judges
my dues?
Association?
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank you. You can stay for Jeopardy if you want. All right, how about Trophy Hunter? Out with it. We're going to talk about Mr. Busybody? Mr. Busybody? Yeah. Fine. That's okay. You know, he wants to go. All these people, you know, they wanted trophy hunter for 400. This college football trophy is named for a coach who got his law degree from Penn in 1892. Yes. Sounds right. Yep. How about trophy hunter for 1,200? A young man sits under a tree and writes down the song of a muse on the Nobel medal for this field. A young man sits under a tree and writes down the song of a muse on the Nobel medal for this field. Poetry, maybe? Do they have a Nobel for poetry? Oh, it's literature. I'm not even going to give myself half credit for that answer. Trophy hunter for 2,000. Kevin Hart called this network's Golden Popcorn Trophy the heaviest award that you can receive. Kevin Hart called this network Golden Popcorn Trophy the heaviest award that you can receive. What is MTV? Why would that be the heaviest award that you can receive? Huh? Are we having any luck with this?
Yeah, we know the problem.
Okay.
There was a juror.
well, in March of 1933, CBS Radio's Robert Trout said, quote, "The president wants to come into your home for a little," what? Yeah. Fireside chat. Very good. Very good. How about famous women for 200? This sprinter set records in both the 100 and 200 meters in the 1988 Olympics. Anybody? Yeah. Jackie Joyner Kersey, is that? Yeah. That's, well, not exactly. Anybody? This sprinter set records in both the 100 and 200 meters in the 1988 Olympics. Who is Florence Griffith Joyner? But you were close. Famous women for 600. The first Latina on the Supreme Court. She says watching Perry Mason as a kid inspired her to become a lawyer. Anybody? Yeah. What did you say? Sotomayor. That's correct. Sonia Sotomayor. For 400, this state has beer and music, the Anheuser-Busch Brewery, and the Scott Joplin residence. Yeah. Missouri, that sounds right. Or I know you're not from there, or you just said Missouri. All right. How about National Historic Landmarks? What do we need? 2 more rows?
No, I think we're missing Jurors.
What about the fill-in, though? Have we got everybody?
I believe so.
You're kidding me. 34, 40.
76.
We have 76 in here now? Oh, then we're full.
Yeah, we're waiting for 15 now.
Okay. National Historic Landmarks for 1200. The first Confederate capital is in this Alabama city. Anybody? First Confederate capital in an Alabama city? What is the name of the city? What is it? No? Yeah? Sounds right. Yep, that's right. Okay, we're going to do one more. National Historic Landmarks for 2000. Boys Town began as this priest's boys' home. Father Flanagan, she's not on the jury, but I'm going to qualify her as a partial. Who is Father Edward Flanagan? It was a big deal when we were kids, right? Father Flanagan's boys' home, yeah. Saved a lot of kids, but Spencer Tracy. They made a movie, yeah, with Eddie Rooney. Was that his first name? Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney. Spencer Tracy. All right. All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Judge Schrader, and welcome to your courthouse. And can you hear me over in the county boardroom? Raise your hands if you can hear. Great, thank you. We're We're here to select a jury today, and it's a criminal case. We have around 150, I didn't see the exact final number, but 150 of you here for jury service today, but we're going to pick a jury of 20 people to hear the case. And actually, you know what? Maybe we should we have space.
I'm sorry.
I wonder if we should bring over.
We don't need that one whole pew.
Okay, she's right behind you. So this.
There's the state.
You want more over?
How long would it take?
How
How long would it take?
How many seats reserved for the state?
No, 12.
State had 12.
So we can bring 12 more jurors over.
Well, he said they wouldn't need one pew. Do they need?
One pew?
Do you need one or none?
The 4 seats in the back we'd like with that full pew.
Okay, then we need 6 now. How long would it take? All right, we're gonna bring 6 more over then.
Okay.
Right, I need 6 more jurors. I'm sorry, 6 or 8?
Whatever you're fitting in a pew.
Whatever fits. I thought it was 7. It is 7.
7?
Yeah.
7. So it should be 77 through 80.
No, that's okay.
Make sure they follow.
If we seem disorganized, we're actually not. But we don't usually do this on Mondays. This is a much larger group than we ordinarily will work with. Okay, they're on their way. Let's do a few more. How about 1960s films? For those of you who were alive in 1960. Chocolate Syrup, Cassava Melon, and Playboy model Marley Renfro were enlisted to create an iconic scene in this film. Chocolate Syrup, Cassava Melon, and a Playboy model, Marley Renfro, were enlisted to create an iconic scene in this film. What is Psycho? You've heard of it. Safe Spaces for 200. The name of a fertile place in the Libyan desert gives us this word for a fertile place in any desert. No, it does say desert. The name of a fertile place in the Libyan desert gives us this word for a fertile place in any desert. Yeah. Oasis. Sounds right. Correct. Safe Spaces for 600. Samuel Johnson said, quote, patriotism is the last one of these for a scoundrel. Yeah. You know, that's pretty close. Yeah, it's pretty close. Anybody thinks he's got or she's got a better answer? Refuge, last refuge of the scoundrel. But I always thought it wasn't patriotism; it was politics. But I don't know. Safe Spaces for 1,000. The extraterrestrial type of this is granted in The extraterritorial type of this is granted in embassies. No, only the jurors are in on this. I don't want the lawyers to embarrass themselves. All right, so, but the safe spaces for 1,000. The extraterritorial type of this is granted in embassies. What is it? Asylum. Excellent. Very good. How about earth science for 400? In a double one of these weather phenomena, the colors in the secondary one are reversed. In a double one of these weather phenomena, the colors in the secondary one are reversed. We got two back there. Let's try this lady. Here. Yeah. Rainbow. That sounds right. Yeah, you know, and you had it right too? I did. All right. Very good. Earth science for 1,200. Standard, this measurement is 1,013 millibars at sea level. In a 2007 Texas tornado, a 194 millibar drop was recorded. I probably could read that better. Yeah. Air pressure. That it says here. I'm gonna say yes. Alex probably would have looked over to the producer and asked what to do. But what is atmospheric pressure? Acceptable is barometric pressure, and you said air pressure, but I think that's okay. What do you think? Should we vote on it? You know, you wouldn't believe how much they're paying me to do this right now. And I know what you're getting, $8, but I don't know if you think it's worth it or not. Earth science for 2,000. The drift of 60,000 Nikes lost from a container ship helped establish that the California one flows into the north equatorial zone. I didn't read that right. In case the drift of 60,000 Nikes lost from a container ship helped establish that the California one flows into the north equatorial one. That sounds right. That sounds right. Yeah, it is correct. All right, how about literary characters? After a poor peasant's wife grows ill, she gives birth to a tiny son whom they name this. After a poor peasant's wife grows ill, she gives birth to a tiny son whom they name this. I think these are very tough questions today. I really do. Who is Tom Thumb? All right, sister cities for 200. This city in Maine, not the Oregon one, is sisters with Shinagawa, Japan, a city of 350,000 inside metropolitan Tokyo. Yeah. Portland. That is correct. Very good. All right, I think we're ready to go now. Okay, folks, welcome everybody, and can you hear me in the boardroom? Raise your hands if you can hear. Are they up?
They have 95 checked in right now, so she's going to prepare the list with 95 and send that over.
Okay.
With the seating chart. Here you go.
Did they raise their hands? They could hear me?
Yes, they did.
Okay, good, thank you. All right. Again, I welcome you to your courthouse, and we're going to pick a jury to try a criminal case. We're going to pick a jury of 20 people. We have 80 people here now, 34 of whom are on this side of the railing, and the remainder on the other side of the railing. And then we have also a large contingent of jurors who are in the county boardroom who can watch and hear what is going on. Well, they can watch me. And they can hear what's said here, hopefully regardless of the speaker. So they are going to be kept fully aware of what's going on, even though they're not here in the courtroom with us. The procedure is going to be that I'm going to ask, and the lawyers will too, it's the Vordeer Examination. You probably saw a movie over there this morning. Did you see a video? Okay. All right. Well, the Vordeer is an examination of people to determine if they are suitable to serve on a jury. And I'll question you, and then the lawyers will have a chance to question you about various factors. We're looking, of course, at whether anybody's biased. We also are going to look at some other factors that may work into whether you're suitable to sit as a juror in the case. And we will do that by questioning just the 34 who are in the, in what we call the well, which is on the inside of the bar. There's that bar at the front of the audience portion of the courtroom. It's called the bar. That's what you hear about passing the bar or admitted to the bar. That's what they're talking about. And that separates the people who are the legal participants in the case, lawyers usually, from the people who are here for either as spectators or as potential jurors or whatever. And the questions are going to be directed just to the 34 people up here. But all of the jurors, those on the other side of the bar, those in the audience portion, and also those over in the county board room, need to listen to these questions since the procedure is going to be that I apologize for this. This is sinus, so it's not. I've been 3 times vaccinated, but I will struggle a little bit with it. But it is sinus related. We're going to question the 34, and we're going to ask them to raise their hands if the answer to any of my questions is other than no. Raise your hand if your answer to any of my questions is other than no. Those of you who are either in the audience here or over in the county boardroom do not have to answer these questions, but you do need to listen carefully to what is happening here in the courtroom, since you will need to answer a question if you're called up here. Would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions asked so far? And if so, which ones? So keep close attention and make a mental note of any that you would raise your hand on, and then you'll be able to answer that question. If we didn't do it that way, then every time we needed a fill-in juror up here, we'd have to go through all the questions again, and believe me, that would not be a good situation, at least in terms of my behavior. So what's going to happen is the 34 up here are going to be questioned, and if any of them is excused for cause, one of the jurors will draw first from the people who are here in the courtroom, and periodically we may bring over more of you folks from over in the county boardroom to join us in the courtroom, and that'll add to our reserve here. But we will take somebody, if there's an excuse for cause in the 34, we'll take somebody from the audience portion to replace that person, and then is when I will ask of that juror, would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions asked so far? And if so, which ones? And then we'll go through that. That change will happen if anyone is excused for cause. So that's because we want to maintain a constant number of 34 jurors on this side of the railing. And the reason we want to do that is because each side, under our law, is entitled to exercise 6 strikes, and they can remove each side can remove 7 of you without needing to give any reason at all, and that'll leave us with the 20 jurors we want to try the case. So that's the reason for 34. That's the reason why we replace, so that we'll always have 34 here from which those 14 strikes can be taken. You're probably wondering, what's he talking about? 20 jurors? Who ever heard of that? You hear on television sometimes they'll talk about alternate jurors. We don't have any alternates. Everybody who is picked is a full-fledged juror. The selection process takes place at the end. If, when we go to verdict, when we go to deliberation, at the end of the trial, if there are more than 12 jurors, then we will strike off whatever number is necessary to get down to that number. So maybe it'll be 8, maybe it'll be 2. We don't know yet. It depends on how many, if there's any family emergencies or illnesses that mean that we have to discharge a juror. And so we'll keep 20 as long as we can, and then, as I say, when we go to deliberation, there'll be 20 who will decide the case. I took a larger number than usual because this trial is going to last a couple of weeks. That's what the lawyers tell me. I suspect they're probably estimating a little bit on the high side, which is what I want them to do. We don't want to run short, or I don't want to give you a false impression. And in fact, when I question you in a few minutes about length of service, I'll probably ask about 2 weeks plus a couple of days, just in case things don't go as rapidly as we expect they will. Well, why don't I talk about that right now? The anticipated length of the trial is 2 weeks. I'm going to ask about 2 weeks plus 2 days. We start typically at 9 in the morning. We work until around noon. We take a break at noon, and food is being brought in for your lunches. And we'll continue at about an hour's delay for lunch. It might be shorter than that, but thereabouts. It could be maybe 45 minutes for lunch, but an hour. And then we'll start again, and we'll work until 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And that'll be the schedule pretty much for the duration of the trial. Every day, 9 a.m. to 4:30 or 5, with a break at lunchtime. We also take breaks in the morning and in the afternoon, as necessary, but there's at least one break, and often 2 in the afternoon. But you should count on being in this building, in the jury room, for the duration of the trial. So that's number one. And number 2 is the duration of the trial. There is I'm going to place it at well under 1 in 100, a less than a 1% chance that for some reason I would order during the trial that you would be sequestered, which would mean that you would be housed in a hotel at night in individual rooms, and you'd be provided with all of your meals all day long. You'd have limited access to television and internet and that type of thing, but I have not done that since I was statutorily required to do so. When I started in the system 50 years ago, on a case of this nature, the jury was required to be sequestered, so I'm familiar with the process, and I know how onerous it is, and so I will resist it in every way I can. But I can't rule it out entirely. As I say, I'm being very honest with you when I tell you there is less than a 1% chance in my estimation that we would come to that, but I don't want to spring it on you suddenly. That's pretty painful. So, but let's talk principally about the reality of it, which is the days that you'll be here and the 9 to 4:30 or 5 time period. I'm not going to guarantee that we won't run later on some occasion. We might have a witness who's come from Thailand or something, who we have to take and has to catch a plane or whatever, and possibly could go a little later in the day or start a little earlier in the morning. but I think that it's fairly safe that we will be on the schedule I've indicated. So let me ask now, and well, I'm going to do a couple of things. Number one, the Vordeer is conducted under oath or affirmation. So I think what I'm just going to do, I'll swear just those who are in this room at this point, and if we bring replacements over from the boardroom, we'll swear them separately. Now, even though those of you back of the railing are not going to be answering questions yet, I'm going to ask that you join in the oath now. So is there anybody who has who's in this building, who's in the courthouse building, who has a religious or moral objection to the taking of the oath? Is there anybody? All right, then would each of you signify your acceptance of the oath by raising one of your hands, please, and the clerk will administer the oath.
So 7 is actually 34, and 34 is 7.
Got it.
Do you and each of you swear you will true answers make to such questions put in regards to your competency to sit as a juror in this action where the state of Wisconsin is plaintiff and Kyle Rittenhouse is defendant? So help you God.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Let me, yeah. In the back row, just the back row, that's seats 1 through 11 in the back. Is there anyone who is unable? Well, let me. I always give a little speech first. The reason I'm talking about this is I saw people's lives change dramatically because of something they had to do for their country. Whether they agreed with it or not, they had to serve in the military and some go to war. And so that's the background with which I approach your obligation as jurors. And I'm saying this so that you understand, if when I ask, is there any reason that you can't be on the jury, understand that I may say no to you because of that background, even though there's no harm in your asking. It's perfectly valid for you to ask to be excused because you've got some obligation, a personal obligation or something, but I may say no anyway. Please understand that that's the background with which I approach this. Otherwise, it can become a question of just people who don't want to be here, wanting to get off, and that wasn't the story in 1968, and it's not the story now. So that's my little talk about that. Now, there are some good reasons. I mean, if you have already purchased tickets and you've got a vacation all paid for or something like that that's coming up next week, I want to hear about that because that can be a perfectly good reason. There may be some work-related issues that would be sufficient cause that I would excuse you, but I do want you to understand, being excused from jury duty is a major thing, and it's not going to just happen easily or routinely, but you're not going to get shouted down either. No, I won't. I'm not. Hopefully, not going to try to. I'm not going to humiliate you in any way by just saying no. So that's the beginning of that. Now, is there anybody for whom this schedule creates a problem in this back row of 1 to 11? All right. Now we're going to question by number, and I believe that's with the consent of both parties in this case. And the reason we're doing it is we've got such a large number of jurors, much higher than usual, and it makes it a lot easier for everybody if we question you by your number. So when I call on, if I recognize you to speak, do you still have those numbers?
No, we took them, but their post-it notes are on the chairs.
They're okay. I'm right behind them. So, but you'll have to crane your neck and get back there and see what your number is if you don't remember it already. But your number is on your chair. So if you'd state your seat number or the number posted on your seat, are they identical? Is she number 3?
Yes.
Okay, I'm trusting you.
Yeah.
All right, number 3. What's up?
I'm number 3. I recently moved to Chicago.
Recently moved to Chicago? All right, well, you have my sympathies, ma'am. But oh, no, I love Chicago. Please. All right, so that's a permanent residence, ma'am? Okay. Any reason this lady shouldn't be excused?
No.
All right, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. You can step down, and she's excused. All right. All right, Mary Irene Mendoza. Would you come up, please, Ms. Mendoza? Yeah, if you we should send them in reserve, in reverse order. I never realized that before, in that first row, because they don't have to climb over everybody.
Judge, may we approach real quick?
And now, number 35, who's in seat 3. Would you have raised your hand so far to anything that I asked? Convenience. Well, convenience is the wrong word. A challenge of the schedule. No problem? All right. Now, I know there's a lot of inconvenience involved in this. And so please understand, we do appreciate your sacrifice, but so some of you aren't even bringing things up that maybe you ordinarily would. So thank you for that. Anybody else in that back row, 1 to 11? Seat number 6.
My reason is I have a job that's been contracted out and I have to finish it this week, or else I break my contract.
Okay. What kind of work is it?
Home and business remodeling?
Do you have anyone who works for you or with you?
Yeah.
Do you? Could that person or persons do the job?
Two other people that work with me.
Okay. Is there a way that they can complete the work? Why not?
They're not going to finish it without me.
Because
I'm the one that gets a lot of the stuff done.
do you ever like get sick or anything like that, or just have to take off or go deer hunting or anything like that?
It's a total of 3 people doing it.
I'm not trying to be difficult.
Okay.
I just would it be impossible for the job to be completed without you?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I'm going to sit on that, and I'll let you know. Number 7.
Well, actually, I'm number 34, but I switched.
Okay,
My-
okay.
Sorry.
No, you have no reason to be sorry.
Okay, so I'm a special ed teacher for severe and profound disabilities, and I'm supposed to tell you it would cause a hardship for my district.
What district is it?
Greenfield.
Okay. You told me.
Okay.
Thank you. Next. This is number 8. Go ahead, ma'am.
I'm a single mother. I have a very young children.
How old are the children?
One is 10 and has a disability, and one is 13. And I'm a teacher, and I took a job last year in their school to attend closer to the one that need extra help. So 2 weeks, that would be very challenging. My family lives in Europe, and they can't travel over here right now because of COVID restrictions still. Otherwise, generally, my mom comes and helps doing things like this.
Your mom ordinarily comes, but she's in Europe?
Yeah, both my mom and dad live in Europe, and generally she travels when it's needed for us. But because of COVID, Italy is not allowed to be traveling at this time yet. So I don't have anybody to leave my children with.
Okay, thanks, ma'am. I'll get back on that one. Anybody else in the back row? Okay, thank you. How about the second row, numbers 12 through 22? And we're talking. This is different from my usual number sequence, so I'm spinning here. What is your number, ma'am?
15.
15, and what's up?
The only thing is I have chronic migraines, so I can't tell you ahead of time. I take normal medication, so I couldn't tell you like tomorrow if I'm going to be down tomorrow.
Okay.
The last one I had was a week and a half ago, and I didn't function until afternoon.
Okay.
So, what it's worth.
Now, migraines can come in multiple forms.
Yes.
Some of them, you could get one that would be
Yeah,
a real pain.
I've been taken out in an ambulance.
Okay, that's what you get some that are disabling.
Yes. Yes.
You have some that you can work past, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. How frequently would you have them that are just terribly, severely disabling?
Once a month.
Okay. Okay.
That's why I'm saying something.
Okay.
I'm okay if you have to think about it. I just wanted to.
Yeah, and I'm going to make a note of it, and I'm going to take it under consideration. That's number 15. So, all right. Next in the middle row, number 21, I think that is, Mr. Number 21. Is that your number, sir?
Yes.
Okay. What's up?
I have nasal surgery scheduled on the 21st in the hospital. I haven't tried to reschedule it yet, and I can, but it is scheduled on the 11th.
Which would you rather do, be here with me or have your nose operated?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not looking forward to it.
Is it something that is to be done urgently?
No.
Number one. Number two,
It's-
is it difficult to reschedule?
I don't know how difficult it would be to reschedule.
Okay.
I haven't even tried.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna give that some thought. Okay. Anybody else in the second row? First row. This is the first row. Yeah. All right. Do you have your hand up, ma'am? Here.
Jury 23.
Okay.
Wouldn't bring this up, but after the 10th, my partner and I, it's just my partner and I who run a business.
Okay.
Only two of us. She's having surgery on the 10th, and she is going to be out for 12 weeks. She's not doing lifting, walking, moving.
What kind of a business is it? A retail or a
It's retail and greenhouse.
okay.
Run here in town.
Do you ever have temporary employees or anything in there?
Only in planting season, which is not until April.
But you do have people who are familiar with the operation or not?
Not the store, the
Retail operation?
portion of it, and right now we're not doing any of the planting, so that's the only thing they would know how to do.
Okay.
It's always just us two on the retail end of it.
This is starting on the 10th?
So if this were to wrap up before then, this is a non-issue.
Right. And you don't know about whether it would be difficult for her to reschedule her
She's
surgery?
not visited
Okay.
and she's already been put off.
Gotcha,
COVID
gotcha.
and passed it.
All right. What's your number again?
23.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Ma'am, number 16? I'm sorry. What's that?
24.
24.
Yes, I'm a single mother and I have a junior high student that I'm responsible to drop off at school and pick up from school. So I don't know what that would look like.
Okay, the drop-off is presumably not a problem with the 9 o'clock start?
No, that would not be a problem.
What about the pickup? What time is that?
He gets off at 3:55.
Okay. Does anyone else ever pick him up?
Not really. His father works second shifts, so it's, primarily I'm the only one that picks him up. So we also have a vacation set for the 27th. You know that East
That won't be a
child.
problem.
Yeah.
Not if I can help it.
Well, there's no promises.
All right. Yeah. Okay, I can tell you right now that I'm afraid that that is not going to be a reason that I will. I assume you can get somebody else to do it, for neighbor or friend.
Not much family here in Kenosha,
Yeah.
so
Does he have friends from school? If he's 14, he probably can.
Good. I don't know any other parents or.
No, but okay. Okay, thanks. Who's next? Anybody in that row? Okay, thanks. And now let's start with a mini row in the front here. In the front, anybody? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, now I'm going to think about some of these that I've left pending, and we'll move on. And I'm going to introduce the case to you. It's entitled "The State Against Kyle Rittenhouse," and when a person or entity feels that some wrong has been done that can be addressed by the law, a complaint can be filed with the clerk of the court, asking for some legal action to be taken. And that document is known as exactly that, the complaint. And that's where the word plaintiff comes from. The person or entity which files the complaint is the plaintiff, and in a criminal case, the state is always the plaintiff and is typically represented by the district attorney of the county, and in this case is represented, the case is presented by Assistant District Attorney Thomas Binger and Assistant District Attorney James Krause. The person against whom this complaint is brought is known as the defendant because of the role of defending the action. And the defendant in this case is a gentleman by the name of Kyle Rittenhouse. And he is here with his lawyers, Mr. Mark Richards and Mr. Corey Sharafasi and Ms. Natalie Wisco. And after some preliminary activity has taken place on the case, the district attorney makes a formal charge selection and presents it to the court in a document which is known as the information. It gets its name from its informative function, and it can contain one or more allegations or charges of criminal activity. You hear that referred to in your experience in life or on television or whatever as counts. And in this case, the information contains 7 counts alleging various levels of unlawful activity. The first charge is charges that on the 25th of August of 2020 at the city of Kenosha in this county, that the defendant recklessly caused the death of Joseph D. Rosenbaum under circumstances which show utter disregard for human life. This is a crime which is literally known as reckless endangerment of the, reckless homicide of the first degree. The second count charges the defendant with an identical, another charge is a first degree recklessly endangering safety, and alleges that at the same time and place the defendant recklessly endangered the safety of another, Richard McGinnis, under circumstances which show utter disregard for human life. The third count charges that the defendant committed an additional crime of reckless endangerment of the first degree at the same time and place by recklessly endangering the safety of an unknown person under circumstances showing an utter disregard for human life. The fourth count charges that at the same time and place the defendant caused the death of Anthony M. Huber with intent to kill that person. This is a charge literally known as intentional homicide of the first degree. The fifth count charges that at the same time and place the defendant attempted to cause the death of Gage Grosskreutz with intent to kill that person. This is a crime literally known as attempted intentional homicide of the first degree. The sixth count charges that at the same time and place, the defendant, being a person under the age of 18, did go armed with a dangerous weapon. This is a crime literally known as possession of a dangerous weapon by a person under 18. And the seventh count charges that at the same time and place, the defendant committed the crime, the unlawful act of failing to comply with an order of local government emergency management activity, alleging that he intentionally failed to comply with an order issued by an agent of the state or of a local unit of government who is engaged in emergency management activities under Chapter 323 of the statutes, including training exercises. And so to each of these charges, I should add also that with respect to the first 5 counts, the district attorney alleges that the crime was committed while the defendant was armed with a dangerous weapon, using a dangerous weapon. To each of these charges in the information, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a demand that every material allegation of each of these counts be proved with respect to the first 6 counts beyond a reasonable doubt, and as to the 7th count, by evidence which is clear, convincing, and satisfactory to a reasonable certainty. And I'll talk later about the burdens of proof. The defendant is not obliged to prove his innocence. The entire burden of proof is upon the district attorney to establish the guilt of the defendant beyond a reasonable doubt. If the state is unable to sustain that burden, then the jury is bound to find the defendant not guilty. Well, let's start with that. Is there anyone of you who is related by blood or marriage or adoption to or acquainted with the defendant, in this case, Kyle Rittenhouse? Is there any one of you who knows any of his family or kin? Does any of you know any of the attorneys whose names have been mentioned here, or has ever had any business or professional or social dealings with any of them, or been involved in a transaction in which one of them was also involved? I'm going to ask I think first I'm going to give you some background on the case, and this case has enjoyed a lot of publicity, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. But I'm going to give you some of what the complaint alleges, because the information is a formal statement of the charge, but there's more of the district attorney's factual assertions contained in the complaint. And it is alleged that on the night in question, there was a good deal of public unrest in the central area of the city of Kenosha. And it is alleged that the defendant, Kyle Rittenhouse, was in Kenosha at that time, that he was armed with a rifle, and that also in the city at that particular time were Joseph Rosenbaum, Richard McGinnis, this unknown person who is referred to in the third count, Anthony Huber, and Gage Grosskreutz, and that during the course of the evening, there was a period when there was close contact between Mr. Rosenbaum and the defendant, and the district attorney alleges that it ended with the defendant firing a bullet, or firing a series of bullets, and one of which brought about the death of Mr. Rosenbaum. With respect to Mr. McGinnis, he was in the close proximity of that incident in which that gunfire occurred, and that the district attorney claims that his safety was endangered by that. After that incident, it is alleged by the district attorney that Mr. Rittenhouse started moving northbound on Sheridan Road. And the incident, by the way, involving Mr. Rosenbaum is alleged to have occurred down at 63rd and Sheridan in a place called the Car Source. And then after that, it is alleged that Mr. Rittenhouse was walking down the center of the Sheridan Road, northbound, and at one point there were other people in the street who appeared to be in pursuit. The district attorney claims in his complaint that Mr. Rittenhouse stumbled and fell, and then there were a series of people who came into close proximity with him, and that at that point he began firing at three of them, the unknown person, Mr. Grosskreutz, well, next Mr. Huber, and then Mr. Grosskreutz, and that he missed his shot or shots involving the unknown person. Mr. Huber was fatally struck, and Mr. Grosskreutz sustained a gunshot wound, and that's what the case is about. And we might as well ask now: is there anybody who's read or heard? Is there anybody who hasn't read or heard anything about this case? Okay. Now, I'm going to give you another talk now. This is about our Constitution. 1,000 years ago, a case like this would have been tried. Well, let's go back even further. Let's go back to I'm sure you remember it, the fall of Rome in 476. And when Rome fell, the world changed dramatically. And the ancient law, which had developed from Greece and Rome, which involved jury trials, not the kind of juries we have today, but they were the resolution of legal disputes by use of reason. And that fell with Rome. And some very primitive methods came into use to decide legal disputes, including criminal cases. Sometimes I saw somebody at one of my grandkids' games a month or so ago, and he was wearing a shirt that said "Demand trial by ordeal." No, demand trial by combat. And I thought, what an unusual shirt. But because I talk about this once in a while, I thought it was kind of interesting. I guess it turns out that there's a program on television that deals with that. Is anybody familiar with that? Well, there's some program on TV that has dealt with the concept of trial by combat, and I think there may be a movie coming out about it. It actually was true 1,000 years ago that people who are having a legal dispute, including in criminal cases, could either themselves or hire someone to fight for them, and they'd fight with the other side physically, and there'd be an ecclesiastical blessing. A priest would bless it, and it was decided that God would guide the hand of the innocent, and that the innocent person would win that fight, and that would be the outcome of the case. They also had something called trial by ordeal. And the concept was that a person would be made to walk across, for example, a bed of coal, burning coals, or stick her hand or his hand into a boiling water. And depending on the healing period, if the person recovered sufficiently, and this was blessed, so that it would be a message from God, that was determined. If he didn't come out too badly, he was innocent. If he did, his punishments had just begun. So that's how they actually decided cases. And then in 1215, Pope Innocent III prohibited priests from participating in these ceremonies. So they had to turn to some other way to determine these issues, and they moved back towards the jury system. And the initial juries were actually made up of people who knew the people involved. People who had either been witnesses, who saw what happened, or people who were acquainted with the people and knew whether they were honorable people, whether they were violent people, whatever the case might be. They had some knowledge of the people, and they'd get together and they'd talk it over and they'd come up with a verdict. Well, what's the number one problem that you would see with a system like that? Bias. Because if the witnesses, well, the people you were with. So the people who were with one side might well side with family members, might side with somebody. So they decided to get away from that. This didn't happen overnight, but they decided to get neutral juries who would hear testimony from the people who actually knew something. And that's the system that continues to this day. That's why you're here. And you're here because the founders of our country didn't trust me. They didn't trust any judge. They knew the abuses that had occurred, even with the jury system. They knew the abuses which occurred under judges who were appointed by the king. And so they were hand-selected, and then they were still responsible to the king to get paid, or I should say, the king was responsible to them to pay them. So they felt that there was way too much influence on the judiciary to trust decisions of this magnitude, deciding a case like this. That should not be entrusted to judges. This should be decided by the people themselves. That's a system that's lasted 225 years. We're the oldest democracy in the world, in part because we have this important check on the government, which is trial by jury. That's why you're here. What goes with that is that there's something else. So that let me start over. The founders of our country were very firm about what was going to go into that Bill of Rights that was passed at the first Congress. And one of the ingredients was trial by jury. They wanted to protect that. It's in the Constitution, the basic law of this country. And it was carried over into the states so that both under the federal and the state constitution, people have a right to a trial by jury. And that's why you're here today. They put another provision in the Constitution entitled, well, the title isn't important. It is for a fair and impartial jury. That's an obligation that they imposed on you. These are people who had risked everything, their lives, as they said themselves in the Declaration of Independence, their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. They pledged all of that, and they literally did. This was a capital offense when they rebelled against their lawful king. And gruesome execution. The forfeiture of all their property, there was something called corruption of blood, where not only were they disinherited, but their children. They would lose everything, and their sacred honor. Now, there's honorable people in this world today, but I don't think it gets the attention that it did in a former era. When people, well, Thomas More is a perfect example, who was the Chancellor of England, and it was the expectation of the king that he would swear an oath that the king, rather than the Pope, was the head of the church. And Thomas More didn't agree with that. All he had to do to save his skin was to take that oath, but he refused. He didn't deny the king's title, but he simply refused to swear that he believed the king to be the head of the church. And as a result, he was beheaded. That's sacred honor. And that is what these people pledged when they gave us our freedom in 1776. And then again, it's what they expected when they created our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, after the formation of the United States under the Constitution. So they specified a fair and impartial jury, not just a jury that's going to be motivated by one influence of another. This case has become very political. It was involved in the politics of the last election year. To this day, you could go out now and read things from all across the political spectrum about this case, most of which is written by people who know nothing. I don't mean that they're know-nothings. I mean that they don't know what you're going to know, those of you who are selected for this jury, who are going to hear for yourselves the real evidence in this case. But there's something called the First Amendment, that's another part of our Constitution, where they guarantee the right of a free press. And it's the price we pay for having a free press is a lot of irresponsible and sloppy journalism. This is not an attack on the media. I've read things about this case that were perfectly stated what had happened in this court. And there are things that I think, was I in the courtroom when that happened? It can be frightening. So I'm not bashing anybody, but I'm going to talk about what you need to do, what you need to be thinking about if you're picked to hear this case, and how much reliance you can put on things that may be just sloppy, which is a vast amount of it. Some of it that is deliberately biased, that's out there, and sometimes from respectable media outlets. But that's the price we pay for having a free press, because we value that. But we also value having a fair trial. So the critical thing you must remember is whatever you've read or heard about the case before, whatever you've been thinking about the case, you have to be in line with what these people who risked their lives for our freedom asked of us, demanded of us. Fair and impartial, based upon the evidence. Those who are picked for this jury will be in the front row seat to see exactly what happened and make a rational decision based on that. And anybody who is not on board with deciding strictly on the evidence needs to tell us that. If you can't do that, then you can't be fair, and you're not in step with what the founders expected and demanded. So, that's speech number 2. Maybe it's speech number 2 in part of 3. But, so, I'll be asking, we're going to ask, what's going to happen is there'll be general Vordeer. I'm going to ask some questions of you. And then the lawyers will ask you some questions. And then we're probably going to call some or many of you into the library. It's not private, and I'll say right now, we have limited space in the library. We're not going to try to move all these jurors into the back room, into the conference room for the individual Vordeer. So we will admit maybe 6 additional people beyond the people, the lawyers and the defendant and the court personnel, and we'll do those individual questioning, but I will permit a limited number of people who may be here from the media and that, so they can keep track of what's going on. The case is being televised. The entire case, I believe, is going to be televised. And by the way, you're not going to watch any of that, those of you who are selected, because you're going to wait until after the trial, and then you can watch as much as you want. But while the case is ongoing, you're not to be going back and looking at things or seeing what, even if you're on the case, not to go back and see what happened at a particular time. But I'll talk about that more later. But you're not going to be pictured, none of you. It is absolutely forbidden for the media to photograph or create any image of anybody on the jury. So there is no question of that being involved. But first of all, let's follow up now. Those of you in the back row who have read or heard anything at all about this case and who cannot, don't think he or you don't think you can cleanse it from your mind. Not that you pretend you never heard it, but that you understand, you know, what the media can do, even when they're doing a tip-top job. They still have, time pressures. They have space limitations. They have to go to commercial. They have all kinds of considerations that we don't have here in the courtroom. This institution was created specifically for trying cases. So we bring in as much evidence as we can that's consistent with the rules that have been established for many cases, hundreds of years, to ensure fair trials. And we have the luxury of time, your time, but we have the luxury of time. We have really strict rules about both sides getting a chance. Both sides, under the Constitution, have a right to question the witnesses. It's called cross-examination. Both sides have the right to force people to come to testify, whether they want to or not. Both sides get an equal chance to argue the case with you. We try to maintain balance. The media don't have that. That's a luxury that they don't have because they have their time limitations and their space limitations and their corporate legal obligations to run their sponsorships and that type of thing. They can't do that. So they, even under the best of circumstances, they can't, no one, and not even the most responsible, well, even really responsible, real journalists, no one would argue that we should try cases in the media. Think about that, how frightening that would be. Instead, we have just what the founders gave us, the right of a trial by jury. So you're going to hear the exact evidence you need to decide the case. Is there anybody in that back row who feels that he or she will be unable to disregard entirely everything you've heard, everything you've seen about the case, any pictures you've seen, any videos you've seen, anything at all you've heard? Anyone who cannot disregard all of that and decide solely on the evidence which is offered in this trial? Anybody? Back row. All right, number 5, is he actual with that? 5, is that right? 6. What's up? 6. No, okay, no, I don't want to, when I say number 5, 6, he kept telling me 6, and I don't want to hear what you saw or heard. What I want to know is, you feel that you will not be able to put it out of your mind?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Did you have your hand up also, ma'am? No, you did not. Pass the mic down 2 places. And this is number 8, yes? What's that? Did you feel you can't put something you read or heard outside of your mind?
No, I don't think I can.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anybody else in the back row? Yeah.
I don't think I can.
Number 4? Okay. All right, I'll get back to you. Thank you. Anybody in the middle row, 12 through 22, who feels that he or she will be unable to completely disregard anything previously heard or seen about the case and decide solely on the evidence which is presented in the court? Tell me your number, please. 19? And you feel that you're just not going to be able to decide solely on what you see and hear in the courtroom under oath, subject to cross-examination?
I do not feel I can ignore.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I do not feel I can ignore different things I've been reading over the past year.
Okay, are you positive? Do the things you've read measure up to the demands that are put on the presentation of evidence in the court?
I believe so. I trust in the people I get my information from.
All right, thank you, sir. First row, number, what is
24.
24. And what's up?
I wish that I could, but I don't.
You just couldn't put aside something you read and rely strictly on what is under oath? And
Not so much that I've read, that I've seen.
okay.
Things that I know that are not going to be involved in these cases.
Okay. All right. Thanks, ma'am. I'm going to get back to you. Anybody else in the front row? The mini row in the front? Anybody? And you're number 33?
Correct.
What you feel that you will be unable to wash away what you already heard and saw and not. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. We'll get back to you. Thanks. Anybody else that I missed? I'm sorry. Number
30.
30. And what's up? You're not going to be.
I feel like I can wash it out of my mind.
Okay. All right. And now, that's my terminology, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page. I'm not asking that you forget it. Just understand it cannot be relied upon for anything, and must be instead the reliance must be placed on what comes in court. Can you do that? No? Okay. Thanks. All right. I'm going to ask the parties to name people who might be witnesses in the case or whose names might be mentioned during evidence presentation during the case. And just as a moment here, does anybody need a break right now? 5-minute break? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Please, I'm going to ask that if you don't want to take advantage of the break for the restroom or something, that you remain. And I think there's water out there. That's for the jurors, is it? If it isn't, it's going to be. If you want to go out and get one of those or something, but otherwise, unless you're needing to use the restroom or something, please stay in your seat if you would. Those of you who leave, do not discuss anything that's happened here in the court today. Nothing. And then come right back. Don't talk with anybody else about anything. And please come back to the same seat you're in right now. Okay, 5 minutes.
Goodbye to you. Wish you didn't have to go. No, 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 no. And when the rain
in the county boardroom when everybody's back. We're waiting a little bit because they have less bathroom facilities over there than they have here, so a little bit of a wait. Came here, my first day working was January 12th of 1971. And I met my wife the first day that on the job, and 49 years later. But this room was very dark. It's darker than it usually is now, both because of that. It looks like a tapestry there, but it's actually a piece of, I don't know terminology, but to me it's wallpaper. It's not paper, but that is what those walls over there, that's what they looked like. They had something applied to them, that piece like that applied to them. And so that was on those walls. The windows were stained glass, which has been replaced, and I'll get into that later. But so that's darkening the room somewhat, and then because of the sun, we've got the shades pulled down somewhat. But I felt it was a very dark room, and it had very dark blue drapes, dark blue, which were pulled all the time. The walls were very dark blue. You don't even see it over there in the experimental areas they've done up there, where they were searching for what the original paint looked like. But there was a very dark blue, probably about equivalent to what the drapes are now. That was the paint on the walls, and it had to go with that. It had a olive green carpeting. Now, I don't think you'd find that in most decorating studios, but
All the jurors are back.
they're all back? Oh, great. Well, I'll finish later. All right. What was I talking about? What was the last discussion? I'm sorry, Mrs. Howell. Oh, about witnesses. Witnesses. That was it. I didn't want to get into that without. Okay. People who might be witnesses in the case or whose names might be mentioned in the testimony. You're going to hear these names. I'm going to ask the lawyers to read them in groups of about 10. But you're not going to hear from all these people at the trial, not even close. You're probably going to hear right now about 200 names of people. But only a fraction of those will actually be testifying at the trial. But we want to make sure that we cover everybody who could theoretically come in as a witness, or more likely whose name might get mentioned. So that's the issue now. The lawyers are going to identify people whose names might be mentioned or who might be witnesses in the case. And then at the end of each group of 10, I'm going to ask whether any of you is familiar with any of those people. And then we'll discuss further what the nature of that acquaintanceship is. Well, I might get into a little bit. But anyway, let's start off with the state's witnesses or names which might be mentioned.
Thank you, Judge. Our first group would consist of Dr. Vasilis Fornas from Frederick Hospital, Dr. William Falco from Frederick Hospital.
Would you do me a favor? I'm going to ask that you be seated and closer to the mic, please.
Sure.
Somebody was messing with the wires here.
Stuck on something. Oh, okay, perfect. Josh Martin from the Kenosha Fire Department, Mark Willer, Detective Benjamin Antaramian, who's seated right here to my right, Officer Pep Moretti from the Kenosha Police Department, Officer Jason Krieger from the Kenosha Police Department, Detective Martin Howard, who's sitting just behind me here, Officer Brittany Bray, and Officer Leo Esparza from the Kenosha Police Department.
Okay, is there anyone of you 34 who knows any of these people whose names have been mentioned? Number 8.
It's Brittany Bray.
Brittany Bray. What is the nature of your acquaintanceship?
I taught one of the children.
You what?
Taught one of the children.
Taught one of her children. How long ago was that?
3 years ago.
Okay, and was there anything that was? I don't want to talk about the child. Was there anything about your having that child as a student that significantly differed from other students?
I don't think so. Her daughter also dances with my child.
Okay, have you ever had an in-depth discussion with the officer about anything other than the child and how school was going?
Well, we talked about arrests in the city. We have done that because recently we were in a single for dance.
Okay, all right. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, anybody else in the back row? Okay, middle row. I call it middle, there's 4, but we'll the middle, the 11 row in the, okay, great. How about this front row? And we're at seat number 24.
I went to school with Brittany Bray.
Okay, and at where? Okay, now Hersing's relatively recent, so this was fairly recent or not?
I would say about 5 years ago.
Okay. Did you have extensive social contact with her?
Other than Facebook friends, no.
Okay. Have you ever discussed business with her? Her business? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Oh, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Front row, the mini row. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. The next few dozen names will be all from the Kenosha Police Department. Sergeant Dusty Nichols, Officer Brandy Valeri, Sergeant Daniel Bandy, Detective Matthew Hagan, Officer Heidi Neeson, former Officer Joseph Kozak, Sergeant Adam Jurgens, Captain James Beller, Officer Jasmine Sanders, and Officer James Caraway.
Okay. Anybody in the back row acquainted with any of the people who have been mentioned? Second row. Number 13.
13. Former Officer Joe Kozak.
Nature of your acquaintanceship?
My dad worked with him for a long time. He's on the same fire department that I'm on for a long time.
Okay. Do you think that, well, did you ever discuss
No, I haven't
his
talked to
employment with him?
A couple of years.
Okay. Do you think that would affect your judgment in this case at all? Okay, thank you. Who else? Okay, now this front the front row, and we have a hand up. Would you give your number, ma'am? 29, and what's up?
I am familiar with Matthew Hagan.
Okay, nature of your acquaintanceship?
Neighbor of my sister, a couple of years, probably about 5 years back, just neighborhood party.
Okay, did you ever get into a discussion about business or anything?
No.
Okay. Do you think that your acquaintanceship with him would affect your judgment in respect to this case at all?
No.
Thank you. Anybody in the front row here, the mini row? Okay. Mr. Kraus.
Thank you. Officer Jeremy DeWitt, Officer Michael Gack, Detective Corey Brennan, Officer Carolyn Weir, Officer Matthew Eakins, Officer Amanda Franco, Officer Carlos Jurina, Officer Kimberly Voss, Officer Eric Wiedner, and Officer Keith Soderstrom.
Oh, anybody? Middle? Front? Mini? All right, next.
Former Officer Jacob Birch, Officer James Crine, Officer Jeffrey Van Wee, Officer Donald Rowley, Michael Payan from Joint Services, Agent Lindman from the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, Sergeant Daniel Cooper from Kenosha Police Department, Officer Saftig from the West Allis Police Department, Officer Brian Koss from the Kenosha Police Department, and Dr. Douglas Kelly from the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office.
Okay, anybody acquainted with any of these people? Back row, middle row, front row, mini row. Okay.
From the FBI, Special Agent Timothy Walther, Special Agent Daniel Gartland, Special Agent Mary Davidson, Special Agent David Kowalski, Officer Caleb Barkley from the Caledonia Police Department, as well as Officer David Baird from the same department. From the Kenosha County Medical Examiner's Office, we have Jennifer Schreeder, Carrie Matushik, and Patrice Hall, and then Detective Philip Brightshaft from the Kenosha Police Department.
Okay, anybody acquainted with any of the, in any row, acquainted with any of those people? All right, would you state your number again, ma'am, please? 33, and with whom are you acquainted?
The medical examiner.
Okay, what is the nature of your acquaintanceship?
Well, I work where I work. There's interaction between the two of us
Okay.
on some occasions.
Okay, have you had personal discussions with the doctor?
No.
Okay, so if he were to testify, that can I assume that that would not affect your judgment in this case in any way?
No, it would not.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Go ahead.
Heather Williams, the Milwaukee Crime Lab, Special Agent Brian Cooney from the FBI, Special Agent David Bianchi from the FBI, Gage Grosskreutz, Giovanni Garcia, Andrew Reeves, Anthony Burwright, Dominic Black, Mackenzie Rittenhouse, and Richard McGinnis.
Anybody acquainted with any of the names which have been mentioned? Okay, let's start with you, sir. Number?
26.
26, what's up?
My son is personal friends with Dominic Black.
Okay, have you had contact with Mr. Black?
Never met.
Okay. Have you discussed with your son any aspect of this that you would not be able to disregard entirely?
No.
Okay. What did you say, 33?
26.
20 what?
26.
Well, I was pretty close, right? All right, 26. Thank you. And there was another hand in that row, ma'am. Number, please? 29. And what's up?
Andrew Reeves.
What is the nature of your acquaintanceship?
My son is friends with him and his brother.
Have you discussed any aspect of this matter with him?
No.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Okay, next segment.
Sure. Brittany Powell, Lopez McKinney, Samantha Mays, Robert Mays, Priscilla Anderson, Hanford Unaste, Walter Godbolt, Tyrese Crump, Ellen Kalick, and Daniel Basovich.
Anybody acquainted with any of those people? Okay, Mr. Kraus.
Whitney Leeming, Mark Garino, Carol Badani, Tiffany Kusera, Nicholas Smith, Cassandra Albrent, Ryan Balch, Dustin Collette, and Kristen Harris.
Anyone? Go ahead.
Joanne Fiedler, Jason Lakowski, Danton Mertz, Alexis Safer, Kevin Glowicki, Joey Kep, Joshua Zeminski, Kelly Zeminski, also known as Kelly Dunn, Colin Doherty, Austin Gregory, Justin Hamilton.
Anybody acquainted with any of those? Thank you. Go ahead.
William Katzman, Tom Seeker, Amber Rasmussen from the State Crime Lab, Daniel Osenosik, former City Council Kevin Mathewson, Officer Sean Morton of the Kenosha Police Department, Sophia Pokonjak, Cameron Wisner, and Bijou Blaise DePriest.
Anyone? Go ahead.
Brandon Gutenschwager, Alyssa Vance, Officer Alex Wickets from the Kenosha Police Department, Officer Brian Ruha from the same department, Detective Joshua Schreiner from the Kenosha Sheriff's Department, Lieutenant Kenneth Urquhart from the Sheriff's Department, Detective Jason Melikar, and Officer Cypress, both of Kenosha Police Department, Soledad Juarez from Joint Services, and Detective Gerald Kaiser from the Kenosha Police Department.
Anyone acquainted with any of those folks? Get the mic over there. All right, your number again?
8.
8, and go ahead.
Jason Malakar.
What is the nature of your...
We just do parents things with this.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Just parents' activities with the children.
Same type of thing?
Yeah.
You know what, my sinus.
Parent things.
Parent things, okay. Any discussion about the employment at all? About the person's employment at all? Or familiarity with this case?
Well, we did talk about the arrest last year or so.
The general discussion of unrest in the community?
Yes.
Okay. Anything specific about this case?
Not I can't recall.
Was there anything that was discussed that you would not be able to put aside and rely exclusively on what's stated in the courtroom here?
To be honest, I'm not sure about that.
Thank you. Anybody else from this group of 10 acquainted with any of these people? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. From Kenosha Police Department, former Officer Todd Thorne, Officer Tanya Kennedy, Officer Nicole Kopp, Officer Joshua Feekes. Then from West Dallas Police Department, Officer Gold, Officer Musadi, Officer Benke, Officer Madden, Officer Corwin, and Officer Binter.
Anybody acquainted with any of those folks? What is it?
I know it's Thorne.
Your number?
Oh, I'm sorry, 14.
14. Now, with whom are you acquainted?
Todd Thorne.
Okay. What is the nature of your acquaintanceship?
We used to go to church together.
Okay. Have you ever discussed his police affairs with him?
Long time ago.
Anything to do with this case?
Nothing to do with this case.
Okay. If you were to testify in this case, would you judge his testimony by a different standard than that you would apply to any other witness?
No.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from this group? Number 8 again.
I know Nicole Kopp. We do swimming with the children together.
Okay, have you discussed any aspect of this case with Nicole Kopp?
Not specifically, no.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me ask you this. If she were to testify in this case, would you judge her testimony by a different standard from that of any other person?
Probably yes, because I know her well.
Any reason this lady shouldn't be excused?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, ma'am. I'm going to excuse you, and thank you for your service. You'll get a handout from the bailiff about future service. Thank you. And let me ask number 36 to come up, please. Yeah. Before you run the gauntlet there, would you have raised your hand in answer to anything which has been asked either by me or by Mr. Krause? Okay, thank you. Would you take that seat, please? Seat 8. I noticed that you list an out-of-county address. But you live in Kenosha County? Yeah. You live in Racine County? Ooh. Did you live in Kenosha County previously?
Yep.
Okay, how long ago did you move?
A year ago.
And where you're living now, is that your permanent residence?
Correct.
Do you have a driving license?
Yes.
What is the address there?
It's my current address.
In Racine?
Correct.
Are you registered to vote
In Racine.
in Racine? Any reason this gentleman shouldn't be excused?
No, Your Honor. No.
All right. Thank you, sir. And always nice to have a visit from our neighbors to the north. 37. And number 37, ma'am, would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions asked so far? Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else now from the last group? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Kraus.
Thank you. Tefun Koskin, Edgar Costa, Jonathan Ford, Justin Katigbak, Deputy Miller from Sauk County, South Dakota, Gilbert Schmidt, Larry Collins, Mike Tobin, Brandon Childers, and Pat Case.
Anybody familiar with any of those folks?
No.
Thank you. Next numbers.
I just correct that Deputy Miller's from Sauk County Sheriff's Department, not South Dakota. Anmol Kindry, Kyle Cook, Nathan DeBruin, Mary Mackenzie Waldschmidt, Juan Pablo, Hannah Giddings, Lucas Zanin, Monica Matta, and Officer Sturma of the Milwaukee Police Department.
Anybody acquainted with any of those folks? Thank you. Go ahead, Mr.
Wendy Rittenhouse, Faith Rittenhouse, Michael Rittenhouse, Ray Dickhard, Charles Rosenbaum, Tamra Rosenbaum, Carrie Ann Swart, Thomas Brazelton, Joshua Binninger, and Agent Mims from Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
Go ahead.
James Warwitz, Karen Bloom, John Huber Jr., Nick Dennis, Chief David Smetana from Pleasant Prairie, Carol Wilkie from Pleasant Prairie HR, Officer Noah Tarski from Antioch, Andrew Ross, and Corey Washington.
Anybody acquainted with any of those folks? Tell us your number, please. 18. What's up?
I know Chief Smetana and Carol Wilkie.
Now, have you ever discussed any aspect of this case with them?
No.
If one of them were to testify, would you judge that person's testimony by a different standard from that you employ with any other witness?
No.
Did you ever discuss any aspect of this case at all with them?
No.
Okay, thank you. Next. Oh, another hand? Okay, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Number 6.
This is number 6.
Yeah, me and Corey discussed it. I was actually down there when all that happened.
In the area here?
Yes.
Any reason this gentleman shouldn't be excused?
No.
Okay, thank you, sir. And let me ask. Number 38. And ma'am, would you have raised your hand in answer to any question asked so far?
The very first one, it's kind of a conflict of interest for me because I'm a caregiver for my elderly father who is accident prone, and he does not have anybody currently sitting with him right now.
Okay, is there anybody else who can do this?
No. My two sisters both live live out of state and they cannot get up here to take my place. And none of my children would be able to take care of it.
Any reason this lady shouldn't be excused?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Number 39. And ma'am, would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions asked so far? Thank you very much. Please take that seat. Okay, anybody else from the last group of names? Go ahead, Mr. Kraus.
Thank you. Corey Washington is also known as Corey Elijah, more commonly. Brandon Beeman, Drew or Frank Hernandez goes by both names. Elijah Schaefer, Julio Rosas, Ford Fisher, Michael Lehman, Devin Bennett, Alicia McCrae, Brandon Utarte Childers, Angela Aker, Sarah Castelli, and Alan Castelli.
Okay, anybody on those names? Your number again?
24.
Okay, what's up?
The Corey Elijah.
Okay.
I watched his live stream that night.
Okay, so this is something that was actually, there was a live stream running that night and you were watching it? Okay. Can you, even though that is claimed to be a live stream, and I'm not suggesting it isn't, can you disassociate yourself from whatever you saw on that or any commentary there may have been and decide solely on the basis of what's presented here in the court?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Any reason this lady shouldn't be excused?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, ma'am. What was her number again? 24. And how about number 40? Would you come up, please? Where did I put number 39? Oh, she missed this. She already conflict. All right, ma'am, would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions asked so far?
Just the first one. Sorry, just the first one. Child care issues with kids.
Okay, what's up?
I've got a 4-year-old in the 4K program, and my husband works, so I've got 5 others.
You've got a 4-year-old in the what program? In the
What?
In the what program?
In the 4K program.
Okay.
It's a half days.
So what's the schedule?
They go in the morning. He has busing, but my other kids don't have busing. So he gets done around 11:45. He gets off the bus.
Okay. And is there a neighbor or a close friend, relative?
All of our relatives, mine and my husband's relatives, are all living up north, like 5 hours.
How about
My husband is trying to see if he can get out of work to come and pick
does
him
he
up.
live close by where he would have to do his transporting? I mean, if you say he has to get off work, does he work here in town?
Yeah.
And is the school here in town?
Yes.
So, okay,
So he would have to be sitting in his office at work. for
Okay.
the rest of the afternoon.
okay.
And then
I'm
he has
gonna
to do transportation for the other kids too. That's-
I'm gonna let that sit for now, but thank you. Anybody else on that last one? Incidentally, was there anyone else who was down here in the area between, let's say, 65th Street and 54th Street, between about 12th Avenue and 6th Avenue on the night that this incident is reported to have occurred? Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sarah Castelli, Alan Castelli, Scott Dickhart, Brianna Garrison, Sahil Kindry, Elena Froh, Brian Blake, Brandon Kramen, Susan Hughes, James Armstrong, from the State Crime Lab, Chelsea Dominguez, and TJ Williams.
Okay, anybody familiar with any of those folks? Okay, thank you. Mr. Richards.
Nicholas Gialvo of Digital Forensics, Peyton Engel, Digital Forensics, Dr. John Black, Force Science Institute, Evan Devlin, Investigator, Dr. Jeffrey Jensen, Medical Examiner, Todd Johnson, Private Investigator, Steve Spignola, Private Investigator, Officer Jacob Birch, Kenosha Police Department, former Officer Amanda Franco, Kenosha Police Department, Sergeant Jeremy DeWitt, Kenosha Police Department.
Familiar with any of those folks? Go ahead.
Jason Lakowski, Ryan Balch, Joanne Fiedler, Nicholas Smith, Jacob Marshall, Joshua Zeminski, also known as Alex Blaine, Kelly Zeminski, also known as Kelly Dunn, Monica Mata, Lucas Zanin, Nathan DeBrune, and Richard McGinnis. That's all, Your Honor.
There was one on your list that you didn't mention, or maybe I didn't hear it. It's number 12 on the first amended witness list.
I didn't list them because the state already listed
Oh,
them
okay,
here.
fair enough. Okay, anybody acquainted with any of those folks? Okay, thank you, folks. Does any of you have any interest, financial or otherwise, in the outcome of this case? Does any of you have any feeling of bias or prejudice for or against anyone involved in this case? Number one, I think I'm going to leave it alone. We'll discuss it in a little bit. Anyone else for or against anybody? Biased for or against anybody? Number three.
So my daughter is friends with the family of one of the deceased.
Okay.
I do not know them.
Okay. Do you have you discussed the matter with your daughter?
That's hard not to do.
Well, no, yeah, I'm not suggesting it is. It isn't. I'm going to leave it for further inquiry. Okay, anybody else? Okay, is there any one of you who has any opinion or has ever formed or expressed any opinion as to the guilt or innocence of the defendant? Let's break that up into separate questions. Once again, keep in mind that your decision is to be based on the evidence which is presented at the trial, but we do want to know if you've ever formed an opinion in the past, or if you've ever communicated any opinion as to the guilt or innocence of the defendant in this case. So let's go with the back row first. Anybody who has ever now has an opinion? Let's start with a now has an opinion. Anybody now have an opinion other than the presumption of our law, which is that the defendant is innocent? As I mentioned a little bit ago, that was another thing that the founders gave us, was a strong presumption of innocence. That's not true everywhere in the world. In some places in the world, there is a presumption of guilt, and the defendant has got to respond and prove his innocence. That is not our case. We have the presumption that the defendant is innocent, and the burden is upon the state to prove guilt and must prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So, is there anyone who now has an opinion as to the guilt of the defendant other than that he or she will indulge the presumption required by law and presume the defendant to be innocent? Did you have your hand up, ma'am, or not?
Sort of.
Okay. Can you, let me ask you this. Whatever feelings you may have had coming in here, can you shed them and follow the precept of our law and presume that the defendant is innocent and refuse to vote guilty unless you find beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty, even if you think that he is probably guilty? Can you do that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Well, you're telling us what you think. That's exactly what we want. So is anyone who objects to the removal of this juror?
No, Your Honor.
Right. I'm going to thank you, ma'am. Excuse you, ma'am, and with our thanks, and see the bailiff and ask. Number 41. All right, and ma'am, would you have raised your hand and answer to anything that's been asked so far? Thank you. Would you please take that seat? Okay, I think I had did I have another hand? Oh, I've got several other hands. Go ahead, number 3.
I'm just not sure at this point.
Okay. Is it that you're not sure that you can put aside what you may have thought or in the past, or is it that you not sure you're willing to do that?
A little bit of both.
Okay. Any reason this juror shouldn't be excused?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Call the next.
Okay, so this on?
Hold on. Bear with me a second. 41?
42.
42. 42, would you go up, please?
You want to ask him before he calls back?
Yeah. Would you have raised your hand in answer?
I'm going to Europe on Friday.
You're going to Europe on Friday?
Yes, sir.
Okay, turn around. Any reason this juror shouldn't be excused? All right, thank you. Have a wonderful trip. Where are we going? Where are we going? Where? Okay, well, have a wonderful time. Would you come up, please, ma'am? Come on up.
Number 43.
Okay, ma'am, would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions so far? Please take seat number 3. What was her number?
She was number 43.
43. All right, number 4, I think you had your hand up.
No, it's just my wife and I watched a lot of these videos on TV, so we kind of had a lot of discussion with each other and came to our own conclusions as far as what we thought was going on.
Okay, now, and that's, I think it's pretty normal. And, you know, people sometimes think that they're supposed to come in here and not have been aware of what is going on, and that's not true at all. And there's nothing wrong with my watching a program about some incident that happened in Beaumont, Texas. And, you know, you can watch what the media reports and form kind of an impression about it. But I wouldn't think for 1 minute that I would decide upon someone's innocence or guilt based upon what I saw on TV or what I had discussed with my family members. If I had the enormous power given to me by the founders of our country and the responsibility to be fair and impartial, I'd understand. You know, that was all fine and good, and it's all good when I'm detached from it. But when I'm right at the core of it, it would be like if the judge had the power that we don't have, given to us by the founders of the country. They said the judge would try these cases if I could watch something on TV and then I could sleep through the tile and then give a verdict decision. You know, that's so. There's nothing wrong with having had prior opinions about it. We do want to know about it if you're asked. But if you're confident and can assure us that I realize the very strong distinction between the safeguards built into our system and what's out in the general population, understand that. If you can do that, then there's not a problem. So you needn't be concerned about having previously formed some impressions about it, as long as you can follow the rules we've talked about. So, what do you think? Well, bear with me. Obviously, I've got a big responsibility here of making a decision. And let me ask it this way: do you think you are any less? You think you are any less able to be fair in this case than anybody else who's here?
No, probably not.
Probably not, or not?
No.
Huh?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. How about next? Number 5.
Just not being able to put my own opinions aside as far as what I've seen and heard about the case.
Well, what would happen if the evidence developed and it actually was different from the information upon which you based your opinion? Would you be able to set your opinion aside then?
No.
You couldn't?
No.
In spite of actually hearing from people who actually saw or even videoed what happened, you wouldn't be able to put that aside?
No.
Okay, any reason this juror shouldn't be excused?
No.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Call up the next, please.
Juror number 44.
Yep. Ma'am, would you have answered, or raised your hand rather, to any of the questions asked so far? Thank you very much. Would you take seat number 5 there, please? Okay, now that back row again. Anybody else? I see number 7, 8. Let's give it a second here.
I don't think I could put my feelings aside. I know quite a few police officers and firefighters and spoke with them a lot.
I heard you say you knew quite a few police officers and firefighters, and I heard
I can't put my feelings aside.
Well, it's a matter. We all encounter incidents.
Well, I shouldn't say feelings. I know what I would think.
Well, you know what you think, but we're talking about hearing the actual evidence.
Right. I don't think I could put it aside.
So if you heard someone testify directly contrary to, and let's say you heard 4 witnesses who are directly contrary to what you think the case was, based upon what you've heard or what you seen, you wouldn't be able to disregard the okay. Any reason this juror shouldn't be excused?
No.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Juror number 45.
Okay, would you have raised your hand and answered any of the questions asked so far? No. Thank you very much, sir. Would you take seat number 8? Okay, anybody else? And the last question was if you've ever formed or expressed any opinion. Now have or express any opinion as to the innocence or guilt of the defendant without hearing the evidence. What's your number, sir? 17, and what's up?
My biases go back to 14 months ago. I've been commenting consistently on news feeds and Facebook. It also goes a little further to my belief in the Second Amendment, which comes from Monroe's writings in the Federalist Papers.
I'm going to stop you.
Okay,
I'll read your website, but here. No. I'm going to tell you. And you haven't done a single thing wrong. But as I said before, if I didn't say it, I'll say it again. This is not a political trial. One of the problems with the way the media has covered this, and it's not just the media. It was mentioned by both political campaigns and the presidential campaign last year. In some instances, very, very imprudently. They're important issues for those who seek to lead our country to discuss. What the innocence or guilt of an individual accused of a crime is not one of them. And also, the trial is not about, to the extent the trial is about the Constitution, it's about the right to a fair trial. And I don't want you to take this as a lecture. My point is that we don't want to fall into the trap that many in the media have, a large percentage of the media, and discuss this as a political trial, or that there are bigger factors than this case at stake in this trial. We're concerned here in this courtroom to try this case in accord with our law, what our law provides, what our rules of evidence prescribe, which have developed over hundreds of years to improve the level of fairness. The jury system is a wonderful system that was given to us by our founders. It hasn't always worked perfectly, and in fact there's some very shameful chapters in the history of juries' determinations in this country. But I've been in this business for 50 years, and it's getting better. It's a lot better now than it was 50 years ago, and if we keep at it and try to contain our feelings and decide this case on the law and on fairness, it's going to get better yet. So I want this case to reflect the greatness of Kenosha and the fairness of Kenosha, and I don't want it to get sidetracked into other issues. Now, I don't care about your opinions on the Second Amendment or somebody else's that are directly contrary. One of the beauties of the jury system, although it's not intended, is that it brings together a composite of the community. And it isn't just a case isn't being decided on political basis. It's being decided, if it's done properly, on the basis of what does the law say, what are the true facts. That's what the jury decides, is what are the true facts, and how do they fit together, and that comes out as a verdict. So I'm sure you'll be questioned here when we go into the private discussions. I'm sure you'll be questioned about anything that you've put out on the internet or what discussions you've had, but they're not disqualifying. The fact that you've disclosed them is fine, but anybody, if you've said something about the case, we want to know about it for sure. But I just don't want to get into a discussion now where we're talking about the Second Amendment or anything like that, because this case is not about, the Second Amendment, like all the constitutional provisions, have a role in this case, but they are not the focus of this case, okay? If I'm going on, bear with me. Okay, so do you think you can be fair in this case?
No, I do not.
Do you think that there are other people here who are going to be fairer than you would be?
I have no idea how to answer that.
Okay.
I would hope so.
You think you're biased?
Yes, I do, and it goes back to the politics that you told me to stop.
No, yeah, okay. Any reason this gentleman shouldn't be excused?
No.
Okay, thank you, sir. And,
Juror number 46.
oh, I'm sorry. Ma'am, would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions asked so far? Okay, you don't have to be bashful about it.
I'm just voicing my opinion about this to a lot of people. So
Okay.
I don't
No, number one, is it possible that your opinion, whatever it is, can be changed?
Yes.
If you heard the evidence in the case, which has the safeguards we talked about, do you think you could put aside what you've said before and decide solely on the evidence?
Yes.
Do you think that you'll have to, once you're on the jury, that you might have to swallow your pride and tell your friends, you know, I actually heard all the evidence?
Yeah.
And will you be able to do that?
Yeah.
I'm going to put you in that seat then, and we'll see what happens. Number 17, please.
I think 15 and 16 had their hands up.
Okay, 15 had hand up. 15.
I've had extensive discussions with my husband, with him. However, I've sought it out for the video and review, and I could be impartial only given that the facts presented were given to both sides. So just as you stated, so often facts aren't presented equally. And the one video I sought out was presenting Mr. Rittenhouse in a more favorable light than the news did. So all the news clips that were showing up were not favorable for him. And what I'm definitely afraid of right now is, yes, I have somewhat of a preconceived notion, which I could overlook, but if given through the trial, you're starting to see that it's a one-sided, I would have problems with that.
Well, this is what the Constitution says. Both sides have the right to question the witnesses. Both sides have the right to force witnesses to attend and to present evidence. Both sides are going to be given the right to argue the case and present their views and interpretations of it. We try to do everything in total balance. When you see Liberty up there on the wall, she's always shown blind. Her eyes are obscured. When every judge takes an oath, from the Chief Justice of the United States right to the municipal judge of the smallest community in the country, every judge takes an additional oath, not just the constitutional oath, but also a judicial oath, which includes the pledge that I will administer justice fairly without respect to persons. That means be fair to everybody who comes in. Don't be looking at who's involved without respect to people. That doesn't mean you don't respect people. It means you don't give an advantage to a bank president or a big executive or a teacher or a priest or anything else. You cover all that up and you decide solely on the evidence, and that's what is expected of the jurors. Now, you said you saw one and then you saw another and you formed a different view of it, and you didn't see anything that's evidence in the case because there's been no evidence. You have a field of a fund of evidence which is absolutely nothing in the eyes of our law. When you have heard all of the evidence, both parties being fair to produce evidence and to challenge evidence and argue evidence, will you be able to be fair? Thank you. Did you have your hand up? It's
Yes,
number.
I did. 16. I verbally already said that he was guilty and all that. And all
I didn't hear what you said.
I verbally admitted that I thought he was guilty, and I figured, okay, while I'm sitting here, and I'll listen through it. In your explanations in the last couple of times here, I kept asking myself, can I honestly do that? And I keep coming up with a thing. If there's evidence there that would be indicating innocence, I don't think I would be fair to the college. I think to the court. I'm making a specifically change of mind presentation. I just can't seem to get it out of my head.
I hope I'm understanding you right, but it sounds like you've made a conclusion early on, and even when you consider the injunction from the founders of our country that you should decide solely on the evidence, you're not going to be able to abandon that opinion? Is that what you're saying?
I do not believe I can.
Okay. Any reason this jury should not be excused? Okay. Thank you, sir. Who's next?
Jury number 47.
All right, number 47, would you have raised your hand and answered to any of the questions asked so far?
Yes, sir.
What's up?
I'm a self-employed tile contractor, and I have a job in a house that is closing next Friday that isn't started yet. And if it's not done, those people move into a house without a bathroom.
Do you have people work with you?
Just me.
Work for you?
Just me.
How much of a financial loss would you take if a competing contractor were to do that work?
4,000-ish.
That's the gross, or that's your?
It would be the gross.
What would be the amount that you would be out of pocket?
Probably 2,500.
Any reason this juror shouldn't be excused?
No.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Juror number 48.
All right, sir, would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions asked so far?
Sorry?
Would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions asked so far? Okay, thank you. Would you take seat number 16? Thank you, sir.
Does he want maybe a pair of headsets? I was just wondering.
Yeah, anybody, well, I didn't mention that. We have some devices here that to amplify the spoken voice, and they also decrease the ambient noises, and people have used them. In fact, I've used them, and they work very well. And we have a schedule where we sanitize them every 6 weeks, so that there's no concern about putting them in. Okay, we do it every day. Every time they're used, we do them. So, anybody want a hearing device? They work through this gadget up here, behind they're infrared, I don't know. Anybody want one, just tell the bailiff. Thank you. All right. Let's see, now we were going through about people who have expressed opinions or now have opinions, and I think we're in, what's your seat number, sir? 19? What's up? Let's wait until the... Yeah.
I have discussed this with multiple officers in my family, and due to how often I've discussed it, I believe my opinion is set in stone on this. I do not think my opinion is set in stone on this. I do not feel that I could change that at all.
You know, I'm not trying to be obnoxious, although I can be. But I'm not trying to be obnoxious. But what you're telling me is that you have discussed it with other people, and no matter what the evidence is, you're sticking with your opinion.
Yes, I don't
Okay,
think
fair. No, well, fair enough. I'm not trying to diminish you in any way. All right, any reason this gentleman shouldn't be excused?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Juror number 49.
$49? Oh, here we are. Sir, would you have raised your hand and answer to any of the questions asked so far? Thank you very much. Would you take seat number 19? Without tripping, I think she said. All right. Anybody else now who feels that he or she now has or has in the past expressed an opinion as to the innocence or guilt of the defendant? Number. Are you 25?
26.
26. Oh, yeah. And what's up?
I've expressed an opinion.
Okay. Whatever the opinion is, can you abandon it after hearing, well, to have an open mind when the evidence starts and decide exclusively, no matter if it's everything you thought about the case turns out not to be fact, not to be established, even no matter what happens, you'll be able to decide on the basis of the evidence here in the court?
Absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else? Okay, number 31.
31, yes. I have expressed an opinion. My nephew was a police officer and left because of the uproar. I will try to be unbiased.
Well, let me ask you this. The uproar, as you refer to it, the unrest, whatever you want to call it, is related to this case only because it is the circumstances under which it occurred. The case, the focus in the case needs to be on the actions of the persons involved. So there were many aspects of what happened during that period that have really almost nothing to do with this case. So I don't know what your nephew, what aspect of it might have upset your nephew, or whatever reaction he had. But when you say you think you'll try to be fair, do you think there's any reason for me to think that you are less likely to be fair than anyone else who's here? Okay, thank you. Okay, 32.
I've expressed opinions when this all went down from Kenosha, so very deep rooted in the city, and have had my opinions. I think the problem I have is the amount and extent of people that I do know in Kenosha and how deep our opinions are about certain things. I think it would be very hard for me to not have outside influences during this time.
Okay, number one, hard is not in the equation. Just as when I was started talking about my pals in school, it was hard for many of them and frightening, I'm sure, but they had to do it because that was their duty. As far as influence by others, one of the instructions I'm going to give those who were selected for the jury is they're not allowed to discuss the case with anyone, not even members of their immediate family, much less anybody else. And what I tell them is, you're welcome. You're okay. It's okay to say, "I'm serving on a jury," but then follow up with, "And the judge told me that if I talk with you about it, we'll both be in really big trouble. And that's such a perfect thing to say because it's the truth. And we don't want to go there. Believe me, neither of us does, but especially you. You don't want to talk about the case. And in fact, what I sometimes will tell people who get funny about it is I'll tell them, they'll give me their opinion about a case, and I'm not talking about this one, but they'll give me their opinion about a pending case, and I'll say, you have me at a disadvantage because I haven't heard the evidence yet. And of course, they haven't either, and they should feel like fools for even doing that. But as I said, it's a human tendency to form some impressions and all that stuff. That's all okay. But when you're coming here in the courtroom and you're on the jury, you're like one of the cardinals when they elect the Pope. They lock him up. And the reason they do it, if you research the history, there's some really fascinating reading about how papal elections used to take place. And so they when they cleaned it up, they said, we're going to lock them all up in the room, and they're not coming out until they're not going to be subject to influences by this one or that one or anybody else. And so I know you're well connected. And for the record, I'm acquainted with this person. She's well known to a member of my family. And but I don't see her even maybe a couple of times a year. Well, I think I see her at church more frequently than that, but beyond that, I don't typically have discussion with her. But so she's well acquainted and with people in the community. But every juror is just going to have to, who's selected, is just going to have a firm bar to having discussions with anybody about the case. Do you think you have opinions or have expressed opinions which you cannot discard entirely and decide this case solely as you view the evidence in this case?
That would be difficult for me to do.
Once again, you're talking about difficult. Do you think that...
I'd be unable to.
Pardon me?
I would be unable to do that.
Are you? Do you think that there's others here who are more able to be fair than you?
I believe so.
Okay. Any reason this lady shouldn't be excused?
No, Your
Okay,
Honor.
thank you.
Juror number 50.
All right, sir, would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions asked so far? Thank you very much. Please take that seat. Okay, anybody else now? Oh, yeah, excuse me. And you are number 33? Oh, no. Okay, let's deal with the one in the back. This is number 10? What's up?
For religious reasons, I firmly believe that thou shalt not kill. I don't know what else to say. That's my opinion. It's been that way for a year now. Throughout this whole riot and everything, I'm just petrified most of the time to even go out. I've got an alarm and cameras on my house now, and I live alone. And like I said, thou shalt not kill.
Well, let me, and I understand that, and I don't want to suggest that you should do anything in violation of the religious beliefs that you hold. However, I think most religious faiths accommodate the belief in self-defense, and that's going to be an issue in this case. The state is contending that these crimes were committed. The law provides that self-defense is a defense and that people have the lawful right to defend themselves. I think most religious groups believe that. I think that when, for example, during the attack on Pearl Harbor back in 1941, the members of our military, the sailors, were on the ship, and all of a sudden planes come and start shooting at them and dropping bombs on them. You know, I think most religious belief would be that they could morally return fire and try literally to kill those who are attacking them to save their own lives and those of their colleagues. So I want to make sure that, you know, those, I think that a large segment of the group here, perhaps everybody who's here, would agree with the proposition that thou shalt not kill, but will be open to what moral belief is. But more importantly, because we have secular institutions in this country, in this court here, we are bound by the law of the state, and regardless of your personal beliefs on the subject of the morality of self-defense, if it is self-defense, I'm not saying it is, if it's self-defense, it is our law that the jury is not to convict if the jury believes that the defendant acted in self-defense, and I don't want to get bogged down on that right now, but do you think you can follow our law, whether or not you agree that that should be the law, and that you think that it should be, you should turn the cheek? Do you think that you can follow the law in terms of making your verdict and examine the evidence and decide whether the case is self-defense? Can you do that?
No, I have to follow God's laws.
Okay. Any reason this juror shouldn't be excused? Thank you, ma'am.
Juror number 51.
All right, ma'am, would you have raised your hand in answer to any of the questions asked so far?
I have a general and a specific bias.
Okay. With the intensity with which you say it, it sounds like that you're not open to what the evidence shows?
In general, people are jerks, dogs are better, and specifically, my dad's funeral was supposed to be on August 25th that night. We had to reschedule because of everything that was going on.
Okay. Now, nobody here is charged with being disorderly. The actual crimes are very specific, and they're a lot more serious than that. But whatever happened in terms of lawful dissent, unlawful behavior, those are not the issues. That's frightening that things were disturbed by people's lives, including something as touching and important as that was destroyed by what happened. But is that something that you think should be taken out on somebody involved in this case?
Life's about choices. Choices have consequences. So,
okay,
honestly,
yeah, that's not in.
If people had minded their own business in the state of their own city, then honestly, this wouldn't be going on right now.
Okay. Is there any reason this juror shouldn't be excused? Thank you, ma'am.
Juror number 52.
I'm sorry. Would you have raised your hand and answered any of the questions asked so far?
Two of the witnesses.
A couple of the witnesses?
Yes.
Who are they?
Brandy Valeri.
Oh, Brandy Valeri.
Brandy Valeri, and I think the other one might have been Ellen Kalick.
What was it?
Ellen Kalick.
Okay. Do you, what's the nature of your acquaintanceship with those folks?
Brandy Valeri, I worked with her at high school, and Ellen Kalick, I've known her since I was little.
Okay. Has either of them discussed any aspect of this with you? If either of them appeared as a witness in the case, would you judge that person's believability by a different standard from that you'd employ with complete strangers? Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask that you take seat number 10, is it? Okay. I think 33 had an opinion. Yes, ma'am. Number 33.
I just feel that I formed my own opinion already before coming here.
Okay, and you're not, I gather from the comments which have been made, you're not unique in that. The question is, can you put that opinion aside and follow what the evidence shows as opposed to an opinion you have based on what you heard outside the courtroom?
No.
You can't do it?
No.
Any reason this lady shouldn't be excused? Thank you, ma'am.
Juror number 53.
No, I did not. Okay, let's see what we can. All right, ma'am, would you have raised your hand and answered any of the questions asked so far? Okay, thank you. Would you take seat number 33?
Right behind you.
Let's see if I can get through. Okay, anybody else now with an opinion? Number 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, yeah. I'm sorry. I did not hear what she's saying.
I don't think the mic is on. Okay.
I have a sister that's in hospice that I take care of at home.
She's at hospice?
Yes.
Okay. Would you,
At the moment.
She's alone at the moment.
4 hours.
you know what? I'm going to take a break now because I just got to pop up that the food is here. And so I'm going to take a break here and discuss this with you in just a minute, if you will. Is there a seat for this lady?
Yes.
Yeah, right there. Take a seat there for the time being, ma'am. Now, pizza is here. And and I believe it's over in the other building as well. And we're going to take a break. How realistic is it to start at 1 o'clock? Actually, I try to go for 1:45, but that's probably pushing it. 1 o'clock?
We have a couple of 1 o'clocks, the competency cases.
1:15. 1:15, we're going to start again. Now, during the break, the pizza's here. If there's a problem with that, see one of the bailiffs and we'll see, a medical problem, not just that you don't like that particular sauce. But, don't talk about the case. You can talk about with the other jurors and that. You can talk, don't talk with anybody who's not in the jury. But if you talk with other jurors, you can talk about the Packer game. You can talk about the Bears game. You can talk about the Blackhawks haven't won a game yet. You can talk about a lot of other things, but don't talk about anything about the case, anything about the people involved, anything about other jurors. And we'll try to start at 1 o'clock. 1:15. And don't use any electronic equipment. Don't be going online and looking anything up that pertains to the case or might pertain to the case or any news facility of any kind. Please do that. And don't communicate with anybody. Don't mention that
They're going to be eating in the courtroom, Judge?
You're going to be eating in the courtroom.
Allowed to leave.
They're not allowed to leave. Okay, well, they can leave to go to the bathroom. Whatever you do, don't make sure you go to the bathroom somewhere other than the courtroom. Well, I should be more specific, I suppose. But anyway, don't
Leave the building.
don't leave the building. Don't talk with anybody not involved. Don't go on. Don't be sending messages. You can send a brief message to your loved ones about, I'll talk to you later and everything's fine. But don't be discussing the nature of what you're doing here or anything like that, please. And that's, you folks in the other building, same thing. And when you return from using the restroom or whatever, you may, you please take the same seat you're in right now. Any questions? All right, bless you all. We'll see you in a little bit.